take a look at this graph. For the better part of a decade, if you wanted to build a computer or just upgrade the one you had, memory was the least of your financial concerns. A standard stick of RAM was cheap. The line on the graph shows this. And then we get to 2025, and the price just spikes. I looked into the supply chains and the massive tech firms buying up stock, and it's clear that this isn't standard inflation. Something broke in the supply chain. Let's say you wanted to build a standard mid-ranged computer in late 2023. You'd pick out your processor, your graphics card, and then you'd throw in some RAM. At the time, 32 gigabytes of memory would run you for maybe $60 or $70. An afterthought, the cheapest part of the entire machine. If you were to try to make that exact same purchase today, you're looking at over $300 for the exact same pieces of metal and silicon. Despite all this, most people barely know about RAM, yet the active consumer base of RAM is clearly panicking over it, which begs the question, why? Well, we need to actually clear up what RAM actually is, because it often gets confused with storage all the time. When you buy a phone with 500 gigabytes of space, that is your storage. Think of it like a filing cabinet in an office. It holds all your documents, your photos, your operating system. It keeps them safe even when the power is off. But you actively can't work inside of a filing cabinet. When you actually want to edit a photo, or play a game, or just open a web browser, your computer has to take that data out of the cabinet and put it on a desk. RAM is that desk. Random access memory. It is the temporary workspace your computer uses to juggle the things you are doing right now. If the desk is too small, things fall off. The computer has to constantly shuffle files back and forth to the cabinet, which takes time, causing the system to stutter and potentially causing app crashes. The more RAM you have, the bigger that desk, and the more tasks that machine can handle simultaneously without choking. For the last 2 decades, making these desks was a volume game. Companies churned out millions of sticks of standard consumer RAM, DDR3, DDR4, DDR5. The manufacturing process got incredibly efficient, which meant the prices for the consumer steadily went downward. But that efficiency relied on a very delicate balance. You see, there aren't hundreds of companies making these memory chips. The global supply chain of RAM is basically an oligopoly controlled by just 3 massive corporations: Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron. If you were to buy memory from Corsair or Kingston or Apple, the actual silicon inside almost certainly came from one of these 3 foundries. And for years, they allocated their massive factory floors to churning out standard memory for our laptops and phones. They built exactly what the consumer market demanded. Then something entered the market. Something with an appetite for memory that dwarfed everything the consumer space had ever seen.
In just a few days, the website has more than 1 million users. ChatGPT. Maybe you've heard of it. If you haven't, then get ready.
When the generative AI boom hit, it basically changed the expected direction of our future, sending a physical shockwave down the hardware supply chain, because artificial intelligence models don't just require fast processors, they required more. They required an unimaginably massive workspace. They need desks the size of football fields. And the big 3 memory manufacturers realized very quickly that the standard consumer RAM they have been making for years wasn't going to cut it.
As big tech companies race to build massive data centers to power the growing world of AI, they need enormous amounts of specialized memory chips to process all that data.
This is HBM, High Bandwidth Memory. If standard RAM was a flat piece of paper, HBM is a dense textbook. It is created by taking multiple memory chips, shaving them down until they are microscopic, and then physically stacking them on top of each other. Then, microscopic holes are drilled straight down into the entire stack, connecting the layers with thousands of tiny copper wires. It is an incredibly difficult, time-consuming, and expensive manufacturing process, but is the only type of memory fast enough and dense enough to feed data to the processes that train modern AI. Every single major AI accelerator chip, the hardware powering everything from ChatGPT to autonomous driving, relies entirely on this specific type of stacked memory. And as tech giants entered the arms race to build the biggest data centers on Earth, the orders for HBM flooded into the foundries. This is where the supply chain kinda broke for the rest of us. A semiconductor factory has a hard physical limit on how many silicon wafers it can process in a month. You cannot simply press a button to speed it up. The chemical and physical processes take months from start to finish. When SK Hynix and Samsung looked at the massive high-margin contracts rolling in from the tech giants, they made a simple business calculation. They stopped making as much standard memory. They took the silicon wafers, the factory floor space, and the engineering resources that used to be dedicated to consumer laptops and phones, and they physically rerouted them to build HBM for AI servers. But here's the detail that truly drives the price spike. Making HBM isn't a one-to-one trade because the manufacturing process for stacked memory is so complex. A significant percentage of the chips fail quality control. They end up in the trash. Industry estimates suggest that to produce an equivalent amount of working HBM, a factory would have to consume 2 to 3 times as many raw silicon wafers as they would for standard RAM. Every time a tech giant orders memory for a new AI server rack, it reallocates/takes away 3 times the amount of manufacturing capacity for the consumer market. A zero-sum game where the consumer is losing. Concerns for this structural realignment of an entire technological industry isn't met without action at least. Memory manufacturers are outbuilding new factory lines, a new fabrication plant that will take years to construct and tens of billions of dollars to equip. Until those new factories come online, the total amount of memory the world can produce is kinda capped. And right now, the most powerful corporations on the planet are using their nearly unlimited capital to buy their way in front of the line, signing exclusive contracts, reserving factory times years in advance, and hoarding the global supply of silicon to ensure they don't lose the AI race. The companies that build consumer electronics, the ones making the laptops and phones you actually buy, are left fighting over whatever factory capacity is left over. But it gets worse. The data indicates that this isn't going to slow down anytime soon. The current generation of AI models is just the beginning, or at least that's what they tell us. When OpenAI released GPT-3 a few years ago, it ran on roughly 175 billion parameters. By the time we got to GPT-4, industry analysis points to a model containing over 1 trillion parameters. Every single one of those parameters takes up physical space inside a memory chip. Just to load a 1 trillion parameter model into a server before you even ask it a single question requires thousands of gigabytes of high bandwidth memory. But loading it is the easy part. Training it is where the hardware actually gets consumed. Looking at the actual math of training a next generation model, when a company sets out to train an AI model that is 10 times larger than its predecessors, they cannot just buy a few more chips. The memory required during the training process scales exponentially because the system has to hold the model, the optimizer states, the gradients, and the activation data all at the exact same time. For a massive model, you're looking at clusters containing tens of thousands of GPUs working in parallel. And like we've seen today, these companies are serious about it. Earlier in 2024, Meta announced the intention to, quote, include 350,000 NVIDIA 8100 GPUs as part of a portfolio that would feature compute power equivalent to nearly 600,000 8100s. Each one of those individual chips containing 80 gigabytes of HBM, that is nearly 28 million gigabytes of the most expensive supply-constrained memory on the world, sitting in a single corporate data center just to train its next model. And they're just one company. xAI, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are all out building competing clusters simultaneously. Right now, we are looking at tens of billions of dollars every single quarter funneled almost entirely into data center infrastructure. And when you look at that level of spending, you just have to ask yourself if this corporate hoarding is actually going to be worth it for them in the end. A single server rack packed with HBM equipped accelerators costs millions of dollars to purchase, install, and power. But the consumer products being generated by their servers are struggling to turn a profit. Most users interact with generative AI through free tiers or $20 monthly subscriptions. The revenue these tools brings in only covers a fraction of the raw hardware and electricity required to keep the servers running. The executives signing these purchase orders knows this because they are operating on a speculative gamble. They are buying up the global supply of silicon because they believe the next iteration of artificial intelligence would unlock entirely new, highly profitable industries. And if that bet pays off, the corporations that hoarded the most memory today would effectively own the computer infrastructure of the future. But if the technology plateaus and the consumer adoption doesn't scale to match the capital being spent, then it will be remembered as a massive misallocation of resources. We won't know the result of that gamble for years, but the immediate consequence is already here. The era of cheap, easily accessible computer memory has ended, while tech giants place multi-billion-dollar bets on what the future might look like. And it also looks like the consumer electronics market is footing the bill today.